Hey, how's it going? It's Keith Townsend from the CTOadvisor.com, and we're at the Cosmopolitan. I hope you're watching the playlist of all the videos we're creating during AWS reInvent 2018. Nate, Avery. Nate, what is your blog?
My blog is Not Your Dad's IT.
Not Your Dad's IT. Nathan from Not Your Dad's IT. 55,000 people I just heard might be attending reInvent.
Yeah.
It's safe to say, and this is hard to say in Vegas, that a conference might have outgrown the Strip.
It's really amazing to see the number of people here, to kind of feel how passionate they are. But in a way, it's also kind of neat because you can walk through any of the locations. For instance, I'm staying at the Aria. You go into breakfast, you hang out at the buffet, and you can talk shop.
Right.
And it's really kind of neat from that perspective.
Almost any person that you meet is going to be here for AWS reInvent. You can bring up managed Kubernetes randomly at it with a table full of strangers, and they'll know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Which is weird. We've gone to big shows here, and 20,000, 25,000 plus. Not quite the same thing, but 55,000 folks.
Yeah.
So speaking of managed Kubernetes, you were recently on the Packet Pushers. I'll maybe put a link to that Packet Pushers episode down there. Really great job.
Thank you.
And I thought I'd have you on the CTO Dose to talk through managed Kubernetes. Kubernetes has been a super active space with IBM buying Red Hat. The company I worked for, VMware, announced that they're going to buy a Heptio, Kubernetes Services and Support Organization. So I thought it'd be, a great idea if we talked a little bit about managed Kubernetes.
Yeah, it's really an interesting space because you see so much, as you say, the Red Hat acquisition, but it's everywhere. You come in from the airport and there's a big old sign about NetApp's managed Kubernetes service, and it's. I think we're almost getting to like peak Kubernetes now, but it makes sense.
Right.
Clearly there's a lot of passion around it. There's a lot of interest in it, and everyone's trying to get their hands around what do I do with these containers? How do I manage them at scale? And what's the best way to do that?
And this story isn't unlike, in a way, the OpenStack story a few years ago. People got excited with the idea of building your own private cloud. However, when they looked at OpenStack, no one really wanted any parts of managing OpenStack on site. No one wanted to hire a set of PhDs to run their private cloud. When you look at Kubernetes, our good symbol of excellence in the community at Google is what's the guy that works Kubernetes Cloud at Google? I want to say we're both black, so I can say the black guy.
Kelsey Hightower.
Kelsey Hightower, yes.
Yeah.
He wrote the book Kubernetes the Hard Way because literally you can do Kubernetes the hard way.
Yeah.
But I don't know many people trying to do it the hard way.
Yeah.
So there's managed Kubernetes. Can you give us a kind of the 5,000 foot view of managed Kubernetes?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind would be a platform like OpenShift. But since we're here at AWS, I would say AWS's EKS is also a good one. And the idea is to take that Kubernetes the hard way and make it a little bit easier to digest, right? You want to be able to hit all the high notes. I need to create my containers in a pod, and I want to be able to control how many instances are being spun up, what are those circumstances in which to do it, and how do I take my code and get it deployed and running resiliently as possible.
And I'll be remiss, since I work for VMware, I don't want to get any nasty notes from my coworkers if I don't mention VMware's managed Kubernetes service. So there's the obligatory VMware mention of that service. But the ideal is pretty simple. You don't want to get into the business of managing the container orchestration. You want to leverage it, you want to use it, you want to consume it, so it's there. Let somebody upgrade it, let someone else maintain it, etc. but I just want to consume it. Let's peel back the layers of this. You've used some of these services. What is some of the unseen parts of even managed Kubernetes?
Yeah, there's still stuff you need to know. I mean, it's a technical field. You need to have some sense of what it is you're getting into. You have to think about what it is you ultimately wish to get out of it. You have to think about your networking. A lot of the services are really nice in that they abstract that away, but you can only get but so far with that level of abstraction, of abstracted knowledge of what's happening under the covers. When you start looking at how do I want my containers to talk, not just to each other, but to the outside world, there are things you need to consider. And it's one of those things where most of the services do a pretty good job of it, but you still just want to kind of know.
So let's peel back the layers a little bit on that. Back when I went to DockerCon last year, Docker still had this concept of batteries included, but you can bring your own if you want.
Yeah.
Kubernetes didn't exactly adopt that same marketing term, but there's a lot of that in there. Like there's native Kubernetes services that you can use if you would like to use these services, but there's also things that you can plug into it. Yeah. What we see a lot of is a lot of activity in the networking space. So if you want to bring your Cisco ACI to your Kubernetes distribution, or your Juniper Contrail, or whatever the platform, VMware's NSX, if you want to bring that to your on-prem Kubernetes, you can do that integration. Do you get that same level of capability with managed Kubernetes?
With some of them you do. So I attended a session this morning where Amazon discussed that very thing. It was saying, hey, there's a plugin framework for how to handle things like your proxy services and things like that. So it appears like that space is there.
So what are some of the things that you, from your experience, what are some of the things you want to kind of keep? I know some of it is going to be requirements based, but generally speaking, you can make it. What are some of the things you want to, let Kubernetes do that, but the part of where vendors are adding value, and you may want to consider extending the value of Kubernetes by looking at these additional services? What are some of those frameworks or plugins?
It seems like definitely which type of load balancer you want to use. And that's always kind of a touchy subject. People kind of have their favorites.
Religion. Right.
Yeah. So I would take a look at that. See who has those really cool plugins and frameworks, and think about what works in your current environment. And like any other technology change, really think about is this something you need to have? Is it a nice to have, or is it a requirement? Because sometimes the thing that's already there, that's built in, it'll get you there.
So I guess that comes along with the topic of operationalizing a service like Kubernetes, or anything. Any time you kind of outsource that cloud control plane, you're at the mercy of whether it's AWS, VMware, OpenShift, managed OpenShift. You're at the mercy of the SaaS provider that's providing it. Yeah. So what are some of the things that you found to be flexible versus inflexible when you're doing managed Kubernetes?
Let's see. What's the most flexible thing? Possibly how you consume your containers. And that's one of those things that seems to be easy to transport. Because I can have a Docker file, and most of the services let me just work from my Docker file. So I can build my containers and then start doing what I want to do. Things that are
you're not necessarily exposed to the Kubernetes interface if you don't want to be exposed to the Kubernetes interface for container building. I can adopt Kubernetes directly and kind of build my YAML XML from Kubernetes directly. And then that spawns containers. Or I can continue to interact with the containers directly.
Right. Now, of course, some of these things may vary based on your vendor. Your mileage may vary. But that's what I've seen so far. Let's see, things that are inflexible.
Like if I wanted to bring my own networking stack, if my company is invested in whether it's NSX, HCI, Contrail, the list goes on and on. If my company has invested in this operating model for security, can I bring that model with me to manage Kubernetes?
That's interesting. I haven't been there yet. I haven't really played around with bringing in the full external stack.
Right.
Most of the customers I work with just haven't hit that level of maturity.
And I think that's what to be honest, that's what I see too. I think I end up, whether it's I'm talking to Joe Beta from Heptio, I'm talking to someone from OpenShift. We kind of see, we read something and we think that the industry is that far ahead, and in reality, most customers are kind of like we're crawling before we are even walking or running to say that we need this level of integration.
I think in the real world, I know the real world is kind of relative, but there are a lot of companies who are still just getting their handle around containers and understanding, which workloads even make sense in a container. And only then do they realize, oh, hey, I have this problem of managing these containers at scale, and maybe then I need Kubernetes or one of these managed Kubernetes services. Not too many people jump straight into that method of delivery.
So even at the early stage of container adoption, do customers really care about the orchestration layer that the orchestration layer has to be Kubernetes? Is that a hard requirement? Because when I look at Amazon and what they've done it sans Kubernetes. They went Mesos in their own what they've now open source. I forget their container platform, but they've done that with an alternative set of tools, and they seem to be fairly good at running infrastructure.
So
is the requirement that there's container orchestration, or is the requirement that it's Kubernetes?
My gut tells me that it should be about the business value, and that it shouldn't matter whether it's Kubernetes or any other platform if it hits your requirements.
Right.
However, we used to make that same argument about virtualization, and then it turned into everyone just kind of going with VMware.
Right.
And there were reasons for that. The tool sets just worked better. There was just this huge momentum around the product. There was
the ecosystem. You can't deny the power of the ecosystem.
And
you can find a technically better solution than Kubernetes, but try finding someone to manage it.
Exactly. And I think that's where we are now with Kubernetes. It's just that's the standard now. That's what we work with. That's what everyone's putting time and effort into learning. And from that aspect, I think that kind of works because you want the business to succeed at whatever it implements. And when you have sort of this front runner, it allows everyone to kind of rally around it.
So let's close out. Any high level recommendations for people wanting to try out Kubernetes? Should they install it on their laptop? Should they go for managed service? If they're just in the I want to kick the tires phase, what's the best way to kick your tires on Kubernetes? Do they go out and buy Kelsey Hightower's Managing Kubernetes the Hard Way? I suggest you go out and buy Kelsey Hightower's Managing Kubernetes the Hard Way, regardless, because it's just a great way to learn the basics about Kubernetes.
I would say I start with a lot of the playlists that are out there on YouTube. There's tons of stuff out there. Kelsey Hightower gives talks, it seems, all the time. Find some of those, watch them, internalize it, and then definitely get your hands on time. Nearly all of the major cloud vendors have some version of it, and you can try. Red Hat, I believe they have learning links as well, and labs that are available. Just take advantage of anything that you can find out there.
All right, Nathan Avery, your blog site again is
Not Your Dad's IT,
and we can find you on Twitter as
at Nathaniel_Avery.
All right, Nate, having you on the CTO Advisor CTO Dose. For those of you not familiar with the CTO Advisor, you can find us on the web, thectoadvisor.com. You can find me on Twitter at CTO Advisor. That's advisor spelled the proper way for O and R.